Following on from the last couple of weeks, for those that don't know, my name's Josh Longley. I'm on the board of the NZGIC. I work for the PGA of New Zealand. So we've got most of the NZGIC here today, which is great. And certainly as we explore and get a little bit into the retail side of the golf industry. And the first person we've got joining us today, which is we're very fortunate to have, is Greg Harford, who's the CEO of Retail New Zealand. Now, I can't imagine how busy the last 6 weeks has been for him and for the retail industry in general. And so I guess my first question to you, Greg, is, have you even had a single day off over this last 6 weeks? How's it been for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty frantic. I did manage a sneaky day off on Friday last week, which was about first in several weeks. The world's moved incredibly fast during the COVID-19 crisis, and it's been really a struggle for us to keep up with everything that's been happening from a government point of view. And the rules have kept changing frequently, as you know. Kind of lurched from press conference to press conference earlier in the crisis, where decisions were being announced, contradictory information was then being published, and it was really hard for our team to keep on top of that. So I guess our focus really through the crisis has been.
Hang on, Greg, you've just gone on to mute for some reason there, Greg. 1 second. Did you mute yourself? Hang on, Greg, we've lost you. There we go. Sorry, you went on to mute for some reason.
That's all right. So look, our focus over the last 8 weeks really has been on understanding this evolving situation, B, communicating that to members, C, providing retailers with advice on how to manage the situation, because there's a range of things obviously impacting that from employment law to kind of the operational practicalities of trading or not trading, and then B, lobbying government for slightly better outcomes for the retail sector. And we've been pushing quite hard on a number of fronts, ranging from wage subsidies to getting things reopen again. So yeah, that's kind of been the last 8 weeks for me. It's been a really busy time, and yeah, hopefully things will start to settle down now as we move back into level 2. But it's going to be a long, slow road, I think, for the retail sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly realise you must have played a large advocacy role for a number of small and large businesses out there. So I'm sure they were very appreciative of the work that you had put out over that time. I guess the first thing to kick it off, and we've seen coming out of you, certainly Sam and I, when we were having a browse through some stuff, you've got a bit of and something that is a key focus, I guess, from around the country at the moment, that Shop Local campaign that we've seen. How did that kind of come about? And tell us a little bit about that. It makes sense for Kiwis to shop local, but you're pushing quite hard for that.
Absolutely. We've been pushing on actually for quite some time, really. The idea that we're all better off if we shop locally, and by locally we mean within New Zealand, but obviously that message is scalable down to local communities as well. It really arose a few years ago, actually, as part of the kind of the push around online sales and the fact that we were losing, New Zealand retailers were losing substantial ground to offshore businesses who were selling into New Zealand online. So we started pushing the message that it was great to shop local, and really that's about supporting local businesses, keeping jobs in local communities. And for the retail sector and hospitality, it is ultimately about keeping vibrancy in town centres. The last thing we want is towns to sort of turn into zombie towns, which I think was Shamil Ekib's great phrase. But without retail and hospo sitting at the heart of communities, there really isn't a community, and you end up with a very sort of disaggregated society where people have got no heart. So retail is about ultimately providing social interaction for people, as well as selling goods. And by hashtag shopping local, we can all get out there and support local businesses and keep them going. So we're continuing to push on that. It has developed an even sort of bigger lens, I think, now with COVID. It's a really valuable message for everyone to be be pushing on it, and I think it's equally applicable to the golf industry as well. You know, you can shop local, support your local golf store. You don't need to buy offshore. And of course, for those who undertake golfing holidays, you're now wanting them to golf local as well, I guess, rather than go offshore, because they don't have that choice. So it's a great opportunity to really demonstrate the great courses and opportunities that we've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly it will continue to be a big push in our golf industry as well. It's funny, I certainly have, you take for granted some of that, like you said, that heart of the community with the hospitality and the retail, and once it's disappeared, you actually then do realise the value of it to the way you actually conduct your own life. So I'm sure there's been a lot of people out there with the same sort of realisation. Just want to touch on one thing that you said before around people switching to online and losing some of the business on that. Obviously, some of the big stuff that you did over the last period of time was the GST loophole, the de minimis, that got closed up with, I guess, over certainly the last little period of time, most people having to switch to a very quick online e-commerce way of doing business. Have you seen any effects since that came in, or do you think that's going to be a slow burn over time?
Definitely a slow burn over time. I think we haven't seen a material change in the way Kiwis shop online from offshore. The GST has been charged effectively, I think, since the 1st of December last year, so it's been 6 months now. We haven't really got statistics at this point to show what's happened to online trading. We know that actually Kiwi retailers, the last stats we had started to garner a little bit more market share than offshore retailers were, which is awesome. Were more likely to make bigger purchases online from New Zealand than they were from overseas. So I guess that kind of points to some of the trust and confidence that you get when you're shopping locally. The rise of COVID, of course, has kind of put a really interesting dimension to it all, because we've seen massive growth in online spending over the last 3 or 4 weeks as things were slowly allowed to reopen. And I think on average across the sector, we're recording a 350% jump in online sales. And that's an average. So we know of some retailers that are doing 700-800% up on where they were at this time last year. So that's absolutely massive. And it's certainly challenging, I think, for smaller retailers in particular who perhaps haven't been already trading in that e-commerce space to make that leap suddenly. Scaling up to deliver a fantastic e-commerce experience does take a little bit of something you can easily do overnight. You can start putting the building blocks in place, but you do need to kind of look pretty seriously at your business and try and work out, well, actually, how do I differentiate myself online from some of those bigger players?
Certainly going to be a pretty cluttered online marketplace going forward, that's for sure.
That's why it's important to shop local, and I think that's sort of a key part of the message that I'd be encouraging anyone here who's in the broader retail space to be spreading. You know, it's shop local. You'll get your goods more quickly than you will if you buy them from overseas, notwithstanding the current issues with courier services capacity around the country. You'll get better assurance if something goes wrong, and you're supporting jobs and keeping communities alive. So there's a lot to be said for shopping locally. And the other thing I think which has happened anecdotally over the last year or so, maybe 18 months, is that the price of many goods being sold online from overseas has crept up. Particularly sort of those on the likes of Amazon and the Book Depository and so forth. You know, things used to be, you know, half the price that they were here in New Zealand, and now they're cheaper, but they're not as cheap as they were, and GST is part of that. But I think also you're seeing overseas retailers having established themselves in the market, looking to extract a bit more revenue.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess as we start to see a little bit, and certainly not the dust settling, but as we start to see some of the effects of the last 6 or 7 weeks coming forward, I just saw yesterday, I think I saw Smith City, James Hardy, obviously a few of them have gone into receivership, and there's a lot of staff that are going to be looking for some work after that. Obviously staff retention for the industry and for even going through a period of growth coming out of this lean time is going to be so important. Have you had any kind of messages to some of the members of the association around how they might be structuring things in order to retain that staff and keep moving forward through these lean times?
Yeah, it's a really really good question. At the moment, I think we're kind of probably on the downwards curve of employment. So we're seeing businesses mostly looking to downsize and lay people off. That's partly because the thing that has kept people in work over the last 8 weeks has been the government wages subsidy, but that starts to run out over the next month. And while the government announced an extension of that in the budget, it's probably not going to be available for most retailers because they won't hit the new and tighter criteria that have been applied. So at the moment, we're kind of seeing that there'll be a substantial decrease in employment across the sector. And it will probably take some years for that to recover. I think we saw with the GFC back in 2008, 2009, that employment numbers shrank quite substantially, and it took something like 6 years to get back to where we had been. This is a much deeper and much bigger shock that the economy is experiencing. So it's probably going to take longer than that to get that recovery fully underway. Having said that, of course, there's always a real need for retailers and any business, in fact, to be working hard to maintain and retain their top performers, because there'll be more and more competition for people who can really deliver fantastic outcomes and do that in the most innovative and productive way. And look, I think it's really important to show staff that you value them and that you listen to them, and that even if times are hard, and even if you've had to, shave their wages or what have you over the last few weeks, try and bonus some of that back if you can. Really look after those who who you need to keep, and think about non-monetary rewards as well as part of that. Possibly that's additional leave, which you might be able to manage without having to pay extra, essentially, or bonus leave or something like that would be something to think about.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Even talking just to my close circle of friends, and a lot of them have been shifted down to maybe the 80% mark, or they've had some stuff going on in their workplace. But yeah, all of them are just talking about the transparency and the level of empathy, I guess, from the person who's at the top of the company, and it's so varying what we're seeing out there from small business and large business owners.
Yeah, I think there should be a sense, ideally, in most businesses that everyone's in it together. So I think we've seen most businesses, the leadership of those businesses has been taking pay cuts along with everyone else. I know some in the retail community have taken greater pay cuts at a management level than have been imposed at a floor staff level. So it is important that everyone feels valued, and that everyone understands what's going on. And I think being transparent about the situation that your business in is really important. Don't be afraid of being honest about where you are, because the last thing you want to be doing is trying to or leading people down a path where they think everything's fine, when in fact there's deep issues that will emerge later down the track. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing that we touched on before, and it might have just been in some informal conversation, and Shelley said it, and I was the same. I was in Newmarket, just in Auckland here recently, and through a very number of retail shops over the weekend, and there was anything from no regard to any personal safety and PPE equipment. There was some places that were incredibly strict with the numbers in, contact tracing, full PPE gear available to anybody that would want it, and staff were obviously fully decked out in it. And have you had any recommendations that have gone out in the retail sector of where you believe business should be sitting in that space?
Yeah, it's been a moving feast, to be honest with you, over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen a couple of flip-flops from government about what the requirements are, so it's been hard to kind of pin that down. But in essence, there is no, for most retail businesses, and certainly I would think in the golf space, there's no requirement for staff to be wearing PPE. There's no, as I understand it, no scientific evidence either way really on the question of masks. That's the message from the Ministry of Health. Gloves are a little bit different. Again, there's no requirement for them to be worn in store, but depending on the products you're selling and the kind of business you're in, they can really add some value, I think, from a customer point of view, and making customers think that things are safe, and actually they do protect you, obviously, because if you've got gloves on, you're not touching surfaces that might be contaminated. But even if you're wearing gloves, our advice is to make sure that you're washing your hands frequently with hot water and soap, of course, and ideally to have some hand sanitizer in place as well for both staff and customers, and to use that frequently. Now, of course, that comes at a substantial cost, so businesses need to assess that. I think the area of greatest confusion that we've seen over the last few days has been around contact tracing. And that's probably the area we've seen quite a few changes coming out of the official advice as well. So where that's landed is that if you're a general retail store, and I'd include golf shops in that category, you don't need to contact trace customers. So there's no requirement for you to keep records of who's coming in and out of your store from a customer point of view. But you are required, quote, where practical, unquote, to maintain a 2-metre distance between customers. So I think that's what we should all be aiming for, is that 2-metre distance, and not the contact tracing side of it. That said, you do need to contact trace your employees. So you need to have records of who's been working when and where. Employees need to stay 1 metre apart from each other, not the 2 metres. There are also some exceptions. So if you're a cafe, or if you've got a cafe on premises or any kind of food service, you do need to maintain contact tracing records, as well as sort of personal services, gyms, massage therapists, hairdressers, that sort of thing also need to be keeping records.
So that would include some golf coaching, and effectively falling under that as well if you were in that space through your retail shop, certainly.
Yeah, yes, very much so. Anywhere where you're in close contact with customers, ideally you should stay that metre apart, but even if you can't, or even if you can rather, you still need to maintain those records. It's been pretty clear gyms and things are included, anything that's kind of membership based. So I guess, although I haven't actually clarified this, but that may well apply to golf courses as well. If you're running a golf course, you might need to keep records of who's coming.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure Carl could speak on that. I'm sure I should know a lot better than this, but the regulations coming out of New Zealand Golf, yes, certainly advocated for, and for playing, I think they've got some sort of contract tracing register that once they book in for an online tee time, that I guess details are kept on that front. Yeah, look, it's interesting out there. I mean, there's some very mixed, as you said, wading through the mixed messages. I see people on the news giving each other hugs. I see people in small businesses with all armed around. Yet we're seeing it's supposed to be a 1 metre and a 2 metre rule out there. So yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting times going forward, and how the retail sector bounces back on that. So look, I know your time is tight today, so look, we can't thank you enough for jumping in today. I've certainly got few things written down that was great. So yeah, we really do appreciate your time.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Cheers.
Right. So as we move to now, so obviously from the Retail Association, and we start to move to somebody that's based in the industry. We've got is a PGA professional by the name of Scott Pickett. Scott is based in Mount Maunganui, where he owns and operates the Golf 360 driving range there. So Scott's been in the industry certainly for a while. I know most people here will know Scott, originally from Hamilton, I believe. Made his way through the mighty Royal Tapuki, then came up for a short stint up in the Big Smoke at the North Shore Golf Club, and has now ended back close to the ocean, which I certainly don't blame him for, Scotty. So yeah, thanks very much for joining us today. And I guess give us, as I asked you earlier, give us some short reflections on how the first week back into level 2 has been.
Yeah, it's been pretty good, really. I think one thing is that a lot of people have had a lot of time to think about their golf and maybe what their next golfing purchase might be. So we've seen a real spike in sales since, particularly people who are coming in for, not just to buy something small, they're after a brand new full set or a brand new set of irons. And yeah, so it's been good. It's been a nice little return. I think a lot of people were possibly expecting it just to sort of start slowly, but I think in talking to other retailers, I think they're finding that things have tracked along pretty nicely since we moved to level 2.
That's great. And I know you were sitting on the edge of your seat with the introduction of some new technology at the range.
Yeah,
so had you launched that prior to lockdown, or was that?
We had actually, yeah. So we'd had two weeks with it, which was it was actually really good when we look back at just to see how it was working for everyone. And the feedback was excellent. People were really enjoying the technology. They actually gave us a really good chance to make sure that we got a lot of the teething issues sorted. So we had, nothing too major for the consumer, but just more on the startup each morning. The machines are designed to power up on their own, but that doesn't always happen if the settings aren't quite in place. So we've got a lot of that tidied up, and today was actually probably the first day that I've done it where they've all just magically come online and all working straight away. So that's good. But yeah, as I say, really good feedback. We have, at the moment, we've limited it just to the driving range use, which is a simple mode that we have it on, just so that there's less cleaning of the touch screens and that sort of thing. But there is so much functionality there. Once you get into, there's a whole lot of games that kids can play. The punters can play St Andrews or Pebble Beach. And also there's a whole lot of club information that you can get. So seeing where you've struck the ball on the face, what your swing speed is, whether the club face was open or closed at impact. There's just so much data on there, and our customers have been loving it.
And I can imagine it's going to be certainly great for the application in the club fitting space for you going forward.
Yeah, 100%. So we've actually got the same sort of setup inside our store, so in a nice controlled environment. But yeah, certainly when you get outside, you get the best of both worlds. So you've got the ball tracking information right there, giving you all the data, but you're actually also seeing that ball physically fly as well. So it's yeah, it's nice to have both.
Yeah, it certainly takes away that, something we talk about in with the trainees, take away the element or the reasons not to actually complete a club fit and go through the purchase at the end. And yes, seeing that ball actually physically fly can be one big reason why people go, look, I'll just hold off. And so it's cool that you can, I guess, alleviate that.
Yeah, I think it works really well. I actually had my father in for a club fitting yesterday, and he's a really good example. Like he hits the ball fairly low. So when we have him on the simulator, you don't always get you can't really see whether that flight's what you want. So being outside, you can actually see the peak height of the flight and know that we're getting fitted into the right gear.
Yep. Now I understand during lockdown you put some work in on your website.
Yeah, so it actually was very timely because juggling running a business with working away on a website is very time consuming for those that have been through the process of loading up all the products. So yeah, that actually gave me a really good opportunity to. I had a couple of days where I just sort of sat at home and just sort of enjoyed the fact that didn't have to get the business was closed, and then I was like, all right, now this is a good little chance to have a really good push on this website and make sure I get it finished. So we got that completed near towards the end of level 4. So it was really good timing. I don't think my timing could have been really any better. The way it all worked out, and really happy with the way it's the way it looks and the way it functions, and that's a lot of good feedback. So we're really happy with it.
Yeah. Did you do that all of yourself? Did you outsource some of that to a company or? Yeah,
I had actually. There was 2 other parties involved. So one was from the design perspective. So he looked at it just in terms of like what our images and what each screen could kind of look like. And then there was another guy who did the website design. So he was involved in all the coding and all that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I was pretty hands-on in terms of the functionality side of it. I really wanted to try and keep people on our site. And so one thing that we added there was videos. We wanted to have a video on the product. And at the moment, we've got a lot of videos there from the actual supplier. So Callaway, for example, might have a video about the Epic Flash driver, but we want to transition that to eventually those videos will be us showing the customer that product. And then at a last minute sort of decision, I decided as a nice little feature, I wanted to add a small customer review, or our review, sorry, a staff review in regards to each product. But yeah, when I made that decision, I forgot that I had 350 products on there. So that added a little bit of time also, but I think it's a nice little touch just to throw in our 2 cents with what we like about that product and why it sort of will work for you. So yeah.
Yeah, and certainly know with a strong team of PGA professionals, which you've always had down there. Certainly, people value your opinion in that space. So yeah, I think that's a very cool addition. Have you been happy with the trade that it's done so far? Has it had any traction since launching?
Yeah, it's been good. Like just ticked along nicely. I actually, bit of a hard case story. I said to a couple of people, as soon as I make my first sale, I'm going to have a beverage. So rum and Coke's my choice of drinks. So I was a bit shocked when the email came through at 7:30 in the morning during lockdown with my first sale. And I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been 4 dozen golf balls heading off somewhere. And so yeah, it was a bit of an unusual to crack a rum and coke open then, but I did it because it was a celebration of a whole lot of hard work to get my website to that point. And but yeah, it's been ticking along nicely. But I haven't just used my website. I've also there's a couple of Facebook pages that I've used as well, and they've worked really well. I identified that I had a whole lot of product that I really needed to clear, some older models and stuff that had just been sitting around for a little while. So I used those channels, and they worked extremely well as well. And I know a lot of retailers come up with different initiatives. One I know that offered a bonus to their members for every dollar that they put into their member account. They got a 10% bonus on top of that, and that worked extremely well for him. And another I know had spoken to a whole lot of suppliers and got product that they wanted to clear, and was able therefore to be able to clear those at clearance prices, but also make some money. So the guys that have done really well through this period are the ones that have been really proactive and made it work for them.
And I certainly, you were one of the earliest ones I saw in a couple of those Facebook groups, and now it seems like it is every single golf pro in the country clearing stock through some of those Facebook sites. Have you seen that drop off since everybody, because it seems like a flood of pros in there now?
It has slowed down a little bit, but I mean, the one particular page there has got 10,000 members, so
it's huge, yeah.
So even yesterday I listed a few things that I really need to go. An opportunity for us that last 7 weeks or so was when we probably typically clear some of our summer clothing, and put it on special in store, but obviously having no one in store meant that we weren't able to clear that. So we don't sell many polos in winter, and I'm sure Shelley probably doesn't down in Dunedin either. So you want to kind of turn those back into cash if you can. And yesterday afternoon, my phone was just sort of, pinging away there with all these people saying, yep, I'll take that, and I'll buy this, and what have you got in large, or what have you got in XL? And so, yeah, it has worked really well for us.
Yeah, that's great. Coming out of this time, and I guess and prior to that, what are you doing currently for a way that you promote, advertise, build your brand out there? So you mentioned a couple of those channels. Are you doing any traditional advertising, or is it mainly through your website and some of your social channels?
Yeah, social media is pretty big for us. A lot of the advice I've been given is around try and do as much as you can organically. So i.e. at no cost, but just investing your time into it. So one thing I've tried to do as much as possible was use my social media to link back to my website, try and steer that traffic through. And, I probably, one thing that has been gold for me really is I've got a Google Analytics tool, which is basically an app that's on my phone. So whenever I do a post, I try and link it back to our website, and I can actually see the traffic increase straight away on the website. So I can see how they've come onto the site. So without knowing who it is, I can see what link they're looking at, and also how many people were on there. So yeah, that's kind of given me the encouragement, because sometimes you might put up a Facebook post and you only get sort of 1 or 2 likes, and you think, well, that was a waste of time. But when you've got maybe 7 or 8 people that have actually gone onto your website as a result of it, I think it's a positive. And I think it might take just a little bit of time. Like, the traffic's growing on the website, and I think it'll continue to grow. We've used these opportunities lately to try and grow our databases as well. And one thing Greg was talking about earlier with the contact tracing is we've started to ask people, hey, you're putting your details in down there, would you be happy to receive a newsletter from us? And it's amazing how many people are actually signing up through that channel as well. So take that inconvenience of having people to sign up in store and make it turn into a positive by getting them into your email database and keep in touch with them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially at the moment where we are trying to figure out where are we getting our greatest investment on our time to be able to track that through some actual data and figure out what posts are getting traction. Yeah, it's really important, certainly when you delve into that space. So that's great that you're into that. Have you seen any difference in over the last little time, or even say coming into level 3 and now into level 2, any different in the actual customer behavior? Are people willing to spend a little bit less? Are you seeing any changes there in the actual customer?
It's hard to say, really. I guess it's pretty early stages, but yeah, we're pretty positive about it. Like I said to my staff, I think that a lot of people have spent a lot of time thinking about golf during the lockdown period, so people were pretty excited to get back into it, and it's our opportunity now to kind of harness that and like to encourage that as well. And whether it be someone coming to the driving range for a hit, or someone that's just getting back into golf, or someone that's making a purchase, we've tried to make it as exciting as possible for them. But Yeah, no, we've had some good trade since, so I'm pretty optimistic about the future. I mean, obviously there's a lot of water to go under the bridge in terms of potentially people losing jobs and that further down the track once the wage subsidy runs out. But I think we're well positioned going forward.
And any particular products that you're finding going well? Is it ones that you are trying to discount, say that summer stuff that you're trying to move out, or is it consumables, balls and gloves and tees? Like what seems to be moving well?
Yeah, so I mean through that Facebook page, it's really been anything that's offering good value. So anything that's reduced in price, and through our website, a little bit of the same. We sell a lot of golf balls on the website already, particularly the multi-buy offers. But I think the equipment side of it, the actual clubs, I think they've been educated enough. I think a lot of people come in now and say, I want a club fitting. So I've probably only sold one club, I think, on my website so far, but I've sold a lot of those consumables. So I think people recognise the importance of a club fitting and the advice that we can give and make sure that they're not going to end up with a club that's not going to work for them. So that's our job, really. Yeah,
it's such an important thing, right? I mean, certainly if you do a lot of coaching as well as into the club fitting, which I know you have, just the impact that it plays on both and the ball flight, and then obviously the ultimate enjoyment that they get from it. Yeah, it's the biggest thing to amateur golfers of any level that I can't express enough the value of a good club fit to them at any point where they're at in their game.
Yep, absolutely. Especially if you're spending a decent amount of money, you might as well get it done and get it done right.
Absolutely. And what about lessons? I mean, you and your team there, so doing some coaching, doing some stuff on the range. You've got a pretty good process in place for to keep your staff safe, and then I guess to communicate out to the general public, like, yep, we can do this, we can function and do this really well.
Yeah, I think obviously we've a few extra precautions. Just keeping our distance is a little more challenging one because you're often fairly close to the golfer, but it's I guess it's working out pretty fine. It's not too much of an inconvenience for us. It's nice to be able to get back and coach properly. I did a couple of online lessons whilst we were in lockdown, and it was definitely more challenging, a lot more backwards and forwards. It is nice to be back in front of golfers again. But it is an interesting one when they come into your space. You can end up backpedaling a little bit, but I think most golfers are recognising that there are some precautions in place, and we're trying to front foot it by letting them know that we are required to keep our distance, and they respect that. So it just means at the moment we maybe can't show them, position their hands on the grip, for example, to get their hands in the right place. We have to sort of talk them through it instead. So just a different way of communicating.
Yeah, a bit of guided discovery, I think the term they like to use on that front. Have you seen coaching come back to, like, you're seeing people come in to get some coaching? Like that's picked up all right as well?
Yeah, it has, and I think a lot of them have been inquiries in store. So
cool.
So they're coming in store and saying, "Hey, have you got time for a lesson today?" And we had even before lockdown, we actually would turning people away. Some days we're just too busy. We have 2 staff, and there's a lot of lessons going on the activity side of it's busy. So it's a good thing. We hate turning them away, but sometimes it's just a matter of rebooking them for the next day. So certainly no issues there. People I think it's a good opportunity for the golfer to try and get rid of some of that rust that might have built up, and we see it a lot here at the driving ranges that people come to the driving ranges their first visit in terms of getting back into the game, so they mightn't have played for a little while, or maybe sometimes even 10, 20 years they've been out of the game, and the driving range is the first place they come back to, and that's usually the question that they ask is ask about the lessons or the lesson packages, and I think one thing that we did which works really well for us in that regard is our simulator is right on the entrance to the shop, so everyone sees it, and we've got a sign there advertising our lessons, so that really helps rather than that being tucked away somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, you're doing an awesome job down there. I certainly know you've got a lot of strings to your bow in the way you do business. It's very impressive from the outside to see. So I hope the next 6 months goes as well as you hope for you, and obviously for the whole industry. And really thank you for your time so far today.
That's all right. Thanks for having me.
Nice. All right, and we'll move on. What's the time? At 10:02. Yes, I'm doing well on the time. So I'll move. We'll make a shift to the also fellow NZGIC board member, and I guess we can call him retail mogul, Sam Sullivan. He's been in the industry for a heck of a long time. I hate to think how long now, but I know he's been in production and retail, importing, sales, marketing. Geez, he's certainly done a lot, and he's currently does corporate sales for Brittain Wynyard. So, Sammy, it's nice to have you on here in this format. And I guess if we jump into the last kind of 6-7 weeks for you and for Brittain Wynyard, how's lockdown been?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty old after that intro, but yeah, no, it's been an interesting time, all right. Initially, things were very quiet, like it was for most of us. People were hunkered down in that level 4 situation. But as we've risen out of that into 3 and 2, we've seen online begin to happen. And certainly the phone has started to ring in terms of people wanting to order product. And it's very heartening to see how quickly people like Scott are making hay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it's funny the difference is, as we were talking around some of those, say, high street shores or off course versus on course, and if we're going to get any, if there's going to be any differences in that in the short term. So if we get into look a little bit of some of that, and certainly you in your current role, I guess, have quite a good amount of visibility over all aspects, I guess, of retail, or rather the locations that they work. So if you look at, say, an off-course retail shop, how are they going to be looking over the next bit of time? Are they going to have any different challenges, or are they in a better position, say, relative to some of the ones purely e-commerce or driving range? What's your thoughts in around here?
Well, interestingly, Scotty's sort of covering off a few of the categories that we have. You know, he's an off-course guy. He's now online. He's a driving range, and he's a PGA professional. So many hats for Scott, and good on him for being so motivated and hitting those areas. I think, you know, for off course, the real challenge has been the rent situation, whether or not they have a lease and what they're going to pay, and if they've been negotiated some sort of deal. But what we're seeing instantly that the doors have opened is that they're getting busy and they're making sales. So that's really promising.
Did you know of any off courses that had signed that recent lease? Because I understand one of the provisions in the commercial space on a recent lease is that if a natural event or a disaster actually stopped you from entering the premises, that they often have something in that leasing contract where they actually don't need to pay rent over that period, or yeah, most of you spoke to got hit with it.
It's been a bit of a mixed bag. I've seen everything from a total rent holiday to negotiating some sort of percentage of normal rent, and even in the extreme, one retailer saying, "I'm just not paying," and the landlord sort of had to suck it up, really. And it's important to understand that not every landlord has that property, you know, without a mortgage on it, so they often can have bills to pay as well. So it's been a bit of a back and forth thing. But I think generally landlords have taken the long-term sort of view and said, well, I want to keep this person in the premises. Potentially there's not going to be anybody coming along that's going to fill that space if they leave. Yeah.
How much, from your kind of thoughts, obviously the international golfing market's going to be pretty hit over the next little bit of time. How much influence do they have, do you think, to the retail sector in the golfing community? I mean, particularly in resorts, right? There are, of course, that Jack's Point, Kinloch, Wairakei's another one that obviously probably had a fair bit of their business hedged around internationals. How's that going to play out, do you think, on the retail front?
Yeah, I think that certainly in the short term for the resorts, they're just going to have to keep things on the down low and then look to be more visible domestically as golfers return to the game and start to travel around the country. Hearing some good reports about bookings, people starting to book for this long weekend coming up. And then I guess it's, you know, what's going to happen with this Trans-Tasman bubble or South Pacific bubble if we can get it off the ground. And then they'll be able to ramp back up, you know, but in the short term, it's just probably keeping the expenses to a minimum.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and hopefully it does. Hopefully the country will get behind that, as Greg said, that shop local and travel local, and pump a lot of those tourism dollars that we're heading out. Leave that in the country. Now, and I know because Scotty touched on a lot of that, how about you and some of the work you've been doing with some of the facilities out there? Have you had any kind of strategies or principles that you've been kind of helping retailers with over the last little bit of time for the next few weeks, but also say for the next 6 months as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a couple of key things, Josh, that retailers need to do. What I'm finding is that we're having retailers who have forward ordered product, but they're not totally sure what it is. So they're not really in a position to understand their cash flow and what it's going to look like in the next few months. So I would really recommend retailers, if they're unsure about where they're at with paying their bills, get together with your accountant, form a bit of a financial plan, and stick to your open to buy. Clear product that's obsolete. As Scott said, it's vital that you get that lead weight from around your business's neck and create cash flow. You've got to get some of that coming back in. And in terms of some of that, even with working with your account, I mean, there's got to be a lot of people doing that at the moment. Are you tying those? Should those conversations be tied in, say, with yourself at Brittain Wynyard to let them know those conversations are going on? Or yeah, I think certainly, communication's vital for this situation. There's going to be people who are stressed in terms of their financial commitments. I think that communication with your creditors is vital. So, it's not necessarily the end of the world if you're going to be late paying, but I'd say don't go off the air and just become invisible. The problem's not going to go away. They'll be far more scared by that than if you were to talk to them and say, hey, look, we're battling here. Can we split some payments out and make some arrangements to get through?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Greg and Scott both said something similar, didn't they, around that? Be very in touch with your numbers and have a plan on your forecasting. It's pretty much. How many? Obviously, there was a real the demand, obviously, or over the last few weeks to shift online. Scott sounded like he'd already had been in the pipeline and certainly was through some of those other channels. Have you seen many businesses want to start shifting that way? Is it conversations that you're having, or?
I think it was conversations we were having prior to this, but for some people, the penny really dropped that, hey, this is an option we need. And I often like to say that it's not e-commerce, it's just commerce nowadays. You really can't separate the two. You've got to sell wherever you can. It may be that selling to your club database is a good idea. And that's somewhere where you can really aim your time and talk to your members. They're a ready-made resource for you. Online's another option. As Scotty said, find some of those Trade Me or Facebook Marketplace groups that you can clear that old product through. It's certainly time to think in different terms than what we have in the past.
Yeah, I know we've had that conversation. That direct response or email marketing that happens over sequenced stuff, really, where you're targeting in on you've got a highly captured member database. But if you were to list them and do the empathy map of what's going on, there's a few very common characteristics about your members. So tailoring your message around that to switch into some stuff there's certainly something that golf pros, I know from chatting with them, don't use all that much, and a lot of it's a time game, but could be a good opportunity to explore some of those areas. Speaking, I guess, with some pros over the last 6 or 7 weeks, there's a few out there, as like Scotty, that are positive and are doing quite well, and buoyant for the future. There's certainly a few on the other side of the coin that are not looking so good. What I guess even in that, and we mentioned obviously talking to your creditors was one. If some of the retail shops out there are struggling with some stuff going forward, you got any recommendations for them or things they can do to help them get out of this space?
Well, I think, Josh, right now there are several things. One is the bank has never been easier to talk to than they are right now. Interest rates are really low. The government's giving them every opportunity to help. So don't be afraid to talk to the bank. I think for PGA pros, yourself and Dominic is a good idea. I think that You know, you guys have got a lot of resource, and you can just provide an ear for people to talk to. I think also, you know, many people in our industry know successful business people, and why not give that a bit of thought and think about who might be able to provide some advice. You'll often find that successful business people are keen to help. They like the people that they meet in golf, and they're keen to provide advice. They won't charge. They're happy just to help. And certainly from a personal point of view, if anyone's battling away, I'm free to chat anytime.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think everybody's realised over this period, you know, yes, the golf industry is funny. We do have a bit of a guarded approach where, you know, we're kind of keeping into our own kind of circle, and my information is this, and but yeah, I really feel like certainly from the interactions that we've had, those walls have come down pretty quickly over this last 6 or 7 weeks, and anybody that I've kind of reached out, even on a personal level, and spoken to, have been more than willing to have a chat for an extended period of time. So yeah, certainly get together on that. Look, I'm aware of time, and we've hit our 11 o'clock mark, so I don't want to keep people too much longer. But look, I mean, I could probably sit here and chat for you for about an hour, Sam, on this. So I realise it probably wasn't quite enough time. I'll be hanging around. I'm sure you will too, Sam, here for a bit of time if anybody wants to jump on and bring the camera on and ask a few specific questions. But on that note, Sam, like I do thank you for this, and we'll push a pause on the recording and wrap the formal part up today and hang around for a brief chat with anybody that wants to from here.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.